Hi, my name is Vivian Lane, and 3 winters ago, a stranger at my door changed everything. It was a Tuesday in January. The sky over Seattle was the color of wet concrete, and a cold rain was tapping against my window. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one with the worn fabric, drinking a cup of tea and reading a book about architecture. My house was small. A simple 2-bedroom craftsman that I had bought for its quiet street and the big maple tree in the backyard. It was my sanctuary. No one from my other life, the big life, knew about it. Here, I wasn't VL, the mysterious billionaire founder of Haven Rest Hotels. I was just Vivian, a woman who liked old books and the sound of the rain. The doorbell rang. It was a short, sharp sound that felt wrong in the quiet of my afternoon. I didn't get visitors. My circle was small and they always called first. I put my book down and walked to the door, my worn socks whispering against the hardwood floor. I looked through the peephole and saw a man I didn't know. He was in his late 30s, wearing a trench coat that was dark with rain. He held a leather satchel and had a look on his face that was both tired and intensely focused. He looked like a man who had been searching for something for a very long time. I opened the door a few inches, leaving the chain on. "Can I help you?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my heart had started to beat a little faster. "Are you Vivian Lane?" he asked. His eyes scanned the part of my face he could see, trying to match it to a picture he had in his mind. "Who's asking?" "My name is Elliot Vance. I'm a reporter with the Financial Times." He held up his press pass. The plastic was fogged with condensation. "I've been working on a story for a year. A story about VL, the owner of Haven Rest Hotels." I felt a cold dread wash over me. I had built a fortress of anonymity around myself for 15 years. I used initials in all legal documents. I never gave interviews. I never attended galas or award ceremonies. The world knew that Haven Rest had an owner, but they didn't know who she was. That was how I wanted it. That was the only way I could feel safe. "I think you have the wrong house," I said, my voice tight. I started to close the door. "Please wait," he said, his voice urgent but not pushy. He didn't try to stop the door. He just looked at me. "I know it's you. I found the original incorporation papers for your first motel in Newark. It was filed under the full name before your lawyers scrubbed it, Vivian Lane. I cross-referenced it with property records for this house purchased through a shell corporation with a name that links back to a holding company you own. I know you graduated from Cornell's hospitality program. I know your family is from Portland." He opened his satchel and pulled out a thin folder. He didn't open it. He just held it. It was a symbol of all my secrets. Neatly packaged. The air grew thick and heavy. The rain seemed to get louder, drumming on the roof like fingers wanting to get in. "What do you want?" I asked. My throat was dry. "The truth," he said simply. "Everyone wants to know who VL is. They think it's some old man, a recluse like Howard Hughes. Nobody ever suspected it was a woman in her late 30s, living in a quiet neighborhood in Seattle. The story is incredible. The first motel. The growth. The way you revolutionize the industry by focusing on simple quality. It's the biggest business secret of the decade. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. This was it. The end of my quiet life. The end of my peace. For 15 years, I had built my empire in silence. I had poured all my pain, all my loneliness, all my anger into work. I built hotels the way other people build families. Each one was a brick in the wall I had constructed between me and my past. Between me and them. My family. The moment this story broke, they would know. My mother, my father, my brother, my sister. They had no idea what I did. They didn't even know where I lived. The last time I had spoken to any of them was 5 years ago. A tense 30-second phone call on Christmas where my mother asked if I was still messing around with those little hotels. I had said yes. And she had said, "Well, that's nice, dear," in a tone that suggested it was anything but. They thought I was a failure. A disappointment. The strange daughter who chose a blue-collar career instead of marrying. Well, they had written me out of their perfect family portrait long ago. If this story has resonated with you so far, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing the video. Your support really helps me grow and create more content. But they were in trouble. I knew that much. I kept track from a distance through public records and news clippings. My father's business built on smoke and mirrors had finally collapsed. My brother's name kept appearing in gossip columns linked to gambling debts and bad deals. My sister's perfect wealthy marriage had ended in a messy public divorce. They were losing everything they cared about. Their money, their status, their beautiful mansion in Portland. And now this reporter was about to tell them that the daughter they had thrown away could buy and sell their entire world 1,000 times over. "Please," I whispered. Not to him, but to the universe. "Please don't do this." Elliot Vance's expression softened. For the first time, he looked less like a reporter and more like a person. "Ms. Lane," he said gently. "A story this big can't stay a secret forever. I can tell it with your help, or someone else can tell it without. I want to tell it right. I want to tell your story. My story." He said the words so easily as if it were a simple thing. He didn't know that my story was a house with locked rooms. And in every room was a memory I had tried to board up and forget. His questions. His folder full of facts were the crowbar prying those doors open. He was sending me tumbling back in time. Back to the place where it all began. To the perfect house in Portland, where I was the only thing that was out of place. Back to a family that never saw me at all. I closed my eyes. The rain fell harder. I knew I couldn't stop him. The world was about to find out who I was. And so were they. Our house in Portland was a monument to appearances. It sat on a hill in a neighborhood of other large, perfect houses with a lawn so green it looked like a carpet and rose bushes. My mother, Eleanor, tended with a kind of desperate fury. Inside, everything was cream-colored and gold. The furniture was stiff and formal. arranged for imaginary guests. Not for a family to live in. We had a living room that no one was allowed to live in and a dining room table that was only used for holidays, where the tension was so thick you could have cut it with one of the sterling silver knives. My father, Wallace Thatcher, was a man who lived for the idea of success. He worked in finance in a vague way I never understood as a child. What I did understand was that his mood was tied to the stock market. He was obsessed with status, with the right schools, the right clubs, the right last names. He saw his children not as people but as extensions of his own ambition. My brother Owen was his masterpiece. He was the golden boy, the heir. Owen could do no wrong. When he got a B on a report card, my father would clap him on the back and say, "That's my boy. Smart enough to pass. Popular enough not to be a nerd." When he crashed his first car, a brand new BMW my father had bought him for his 16th birthday, my father just laughed and bought him another one. Owen learned early that the rules didn't apply to him. He was charming and reckless, and our parents adored him for it. My sister Chloe was my mother's project. She was beautiful, graceful, and obedient. From the time she was a little girl, she was groomed for one purpose: to marry a rich and powerful man. Her life was a blur of piano lessons, ballet classes, and etiquette courses. My mother taught her which forks to use, how to laugh at a man's jokes without looking unintelligent, and how to dress to attract the right kind of attention. Chloe absorbed it all. She was quiet and compliant, a perfect doll in our mother's dollhouse. And then there was me. I was the leftover child, the one who didn't fit. I wasn't charming like Owen or beautiful like Chloe. I was quiet, observant, and I had a strange obsession: hotels. I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was from the one family vacation we took to San Francisco when I was 7. While my family was interested in the tourist traps, I was fascinated by our hotel. I watched the bellhops, the front desk clerks, the housekeepers with their carts. I saw a system, a giant complex machine dedicated to making people feel comfortable and safe when they were far from home. It felt like magic to me. I started drawing hotels in a sketchbook. I designed lobbies and guest rooms. I created floor plans. I would spend hours on my bedroom floor, lost in my own world. My family thought it was a joke. I remember one evening when I was 12, my father had clients over for dinner. I had just finished a detailed drawing of a hotel lobby with a grand staircase and a fountain. I was so proud of it. I ran downstairs to show him. He was in the living room laughing with his guests, a glass of scotch in his hand. "Dad, look," I said, holding out my sketchbook. He glanced down at it, his smile faltering. "What is that?" "It's a hotel. I designed it. See, the check-in desk is here, and there's a cafe over there." He cut me off with a short, sharp laugh. "A hotel," he said to his guests, shaking his head. "Vivian here wants to be a maid when she grows up." The other men laughed with him. I felt my face burn with shame. I saw my mother in the doorway, giving me a look of pure exasperation. "Why do you always have to be so strange?" her eyes said. I ran back upstairs and hid my sketchbook under my bed. I didn't show my drawings to anyone after that. But I didn't stop. It became my secret. Dinner at our house was the stage for our family's dysfunction. My father would hold court talking about his deals. Owen would brag about a sports victory or a girl he was dating. My mother would steer the conversation towards Chloe's latest social success. I would sit in silence, a ghost at the table. If I tried to talk about something I had learned in school, my father would interrupt me to ask Owen a question. If I had an opinion, my mother would say, "Hush, Vivian. Let the adults talk." They didn't just ignore me. They actively dismissed me. My interests were silly. My good grades were expected and unacknowledged. When Owen won a simple sports trophy, it was displayed on the mantelpiece. When I won the state science fair, my certificate ended up in a drawer in the kitchen stained with a coffee ring. The message was clear. I was not important. My dreams were not valid. My role was to be quiet, to be invisible, to not cause any trouble for the real stars of the family, Owen and Chloe. I spent most of my childhood feeling like I was watching my family through a window. I was there, but I wasn't really a part of it. I was a supporting character in a story that was all about them. And so, I retreated further into my world of hotels. They were my escape. In my mind, I could build places where everyone felt welcome, where everyone was treated with respect, where no one ever felt invisible. I could build a world that was the exact opposite of the one I lived in. It was a dream I held onto like a secret treasure, a flicker of light in a cold, lonely house. And I promised myself that one day I would make it real. The arguments about my future started when I was a senior in high school. It was assumed without any discussion that I would go to a liberal arts college, get a degree in something respectable like art history or communications, and find a suitable husband. That was the Thatcher family plan for daughters. Chloe was already at a private college in New England, majoring in whatever my mother told her to. The breaking point came on a Sunday afternoon in April. College acceptance letters had arrived. I was sitting at the polished dining room table with my parents. The air was thick with the scent of lemon polish and their expectations. "So," my father said, not looking up from his newspaper, "have you decided? Vassar or Smith? Your mother prefers Vassar. It has a better reputation." I took a deep breath. My hands were clammy. "Actually," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "I've decided to go to Cornell." My mother looked up from her magazine. "Cornell? I suppose that's acceptable. Which program?" Here it was. The moment of truth. "Their School of Hotel Administration," I said as clearly and confidently as I could. There was a dead silence. My father slowly lowered his newspaper. He stared at me over the top of his reading glasses. His expression, one of pure disbelief. "You're joking," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "It's the best hospitality program in the country. It's what I've always wanted." Hospitality. My mother's voice was a horrified whisper. Vivian, that's a trade school. It's for people who manage motels on the highway. What will we tell people? You'll tell them I'm studying business management, I said, my courage growing. Because that's what it is. I forbid it, my father said, his voice low and dangerous. He stood up. No daughter of mine is going to school to learn how to fold napkins and clean toilets. You are a Thatcher. You will go to Vassar. It's my life, I said, standing up to face him. It's my choice. I'm not going to live my life for your reputation. I want to build things. I want to run a business. You know nothing about business, he scoffed. You know about silly little drawings in a notebook. Owen is the one with the head for business. You are throwing your life away on a blue-collar fantasy. We stood there staring at each other across the vast expanse of polished wood. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity that he would never see me. He would never understand. I was just a pawn to him. A piece to be moved around, a board to his advantage. I'm going to Cornell, I said, my voice cold and steady. I've already accepted. His face turned dark red. Fine, he hissed. You go. But you go on your own. Not one single penny from this family will go towards that ridiculous, embarrassing degree. You want to learn how to work in a hotel? Go ahead. See what it's like to be on your own. You won't last a semester. That was it. He turned his back on me and walked out of the room. My mother just shook her head. A look of deep disappointment on her face and followed him. I was left alone in the silent, perfect dining room. I had been cut off. College was the hardest and loneliest time of my life. My father was true to his word. While my friends got care packages from home and called their parents for money, I had nothing. I worked 3 jobs to survive. From Monday to Friday. I worked the early morning shift at a diner, smelling of grease and coffee when I went to my first class. My afternoons were spent in the university library, reshelving books in the quiet, dusty stacks. On weekends, I was part of a cleaning crew that cleaned academic buildings after hours. I lived on instant noodles and cheap bread. My dorm room was bare, with none of the posters or personal touches the other girls had. I was always tired. There was a constant dull ache in my muscles from the physical labor and a sharp, persistent ache in my heart from the loneliness. I tried calling home a few times. The conversations were short and cold. My mother would ask if I had come to my senses yet. My father wouldn't even come to the phone. They talked about Owen's fraternity parties and Chloe's new wealthy boyfriend. It was clear they were moving on with their lives and I was no longer a part of them. The final blow came at graduation. I had done it. I had survived. I graduated with honors at the top of my class. I had worked harder than anyone I knew. I bought myself a simple dress from a thrift store and sat with my fellow graduates waiting for my name to be called. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I scanned the crowd. I looked for them. A foolish, stubborn part of my heart, still hoping they would show up, that they would be proud of me. I saw my friends' families waving and cheering, their faces bright with love. And then I saw the 2 empty seats where my parents should have been. A profound sadness washed over me, so deep it felt like it might pull me under. I had won. I had proven my father wrong. I had survived on my own. But as I stood there alone in a sea of celebrating families, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like I had lost the only thing I had ever really wanted. I had my dream, but I had lost my family to get it. I clutched my diploma and walked off the stage. My head held high, and I didn't let a single tear fall until I was back in my empty room. My degree didn't get me a corner office. It got me a job as a housekeeper at a mid-tier hotel in Philadelphia. My father's mocking words echoed in my ears. No daughter of mine is going to learn how to clean toilets. Well, here I was. And I was determined to be the best toilet cleaner they had ever seen. The work was brutal. It was a world away from the theories and case studies I had learned in college. My days were a blur of scrubbing bathrooms, changing hundreds of bed sheets, and pushing a heavy cart down endless hallways. My back ached. My hands were raw from the cleaning chemicals, and I was invisible to the guests. I was just part of the background, a uniform that existed to make their stay comfortable. But I wasn't just cleaning. I was watching. I was learning. I saw how a slow elevator could ruin a guest's morning. I saw how a friendly word from a housekeeper could make someone's day. I saw the waste, the inefficiencies, the small things that could be done better. I talked to everyone: the laundry staff in the steaming basement, the maintenance crew who knew the building's secrets, the front desk clerks who dealt with every complaint. I was absorbing the business from the ground up, from the inside out. My manager was a woman named Maria Soto. She was in her 52nd, a woman who had started as a housekeeper herself and worked her way up to running the entire hotel. She was tough, sharp, and she didn't suffer fools. She saw my Cornell degree on my application and was immediately skeptical. "You think a fancy piece of paper means you know how a hotel breathes?" she asked me during my interview, her dark eyes sizing me up. "This business isn't learned in a classroom. It's learned in the laundry room at 3 a.m. When a machine breaks down, it's learned on your feet." She hired me, but she tested me relentlessly. She gave me the worst shifts, the most difficult floors. She would inspect my rooms, running a white-gloved finger over a picture frame, looking for a single speck of dust. For months, she barely spoke to me, except to point out a mistake. I didn't complain. I just worked harder. I finished my own rooms early and then helped the other housekeepers. I created a new system for organizing the supply closets, which cut our restocking time in half. I learned the names of the regular guests and made sure their rooms were prepared exactly how they liked them. Maria noticed everything. She never said a word of praise. But one day, she called me into her office. "The 3rd floor is a disaster," she said, getting straight to the point. "Guest satisfaction scores are in the toilet. They complain about the noise, the beds, the Wi-Fi. It's a dying limb on this hotel. I want you to fix it." Me? I was stunned. I'm a housekeeper. I know what you are, she said, her expression unreadable. I've read your file. I know what you studied. You have 2 weeks to give me a plan. Don't waste my time. It was the chance I had been waiting for. I threw myself into the project. I didn't just look at spreadsheets. I talked to people. I interviewed guests checking out from the 3rd floor, asking them what they didn't like. I sat in the rooms and listened. The ice machine down the hall was incredibly loud. The mattresses were old and saggy. The Wi-Fi signal was weak because the router was at the far end of the building. My plan wasn't about fancy decorations. It was about fundamentals. I proposed replacing the mattresses with a better mid-priced model I had sourced from a local supplier. I found sound dampening panels to install around the ice machine. I calculated the cost of a signal booster to fix the Wi-Fi. I suggested a simple, practical change, putting a high-quality coffee maker and locally sourced coffee in each room. A small touch of comfort. I put it all into a detailed report, complete with a budget that showed how the changes would pay for themselves in 6 months through higher occupancy and better reviews. I slid the report across Maria's desk and waited, my heart pounding. She read it in silence, her face giving nothing away. She flipped through every page, studied every number. It felt like hours. Finally, she closed the folder and looked at me. "This is a good plan," she said. It was the first compliment she had ever given me. "It's smart. Practical. You see the business. You don't just see the curtains." She leaned back in her chair. "I'm going to give you the budget to do it. And I'm promoting you to assistant floor manager. You'll oversee the project." She paused, her eyes meeting mine. I was right. "You have good instincts, Lane. Don't waste them." That was the moment everything changed. It was a promotion. Yes, but it was more than that. It was the first time in my life that someone I respected had looked at my passion for hotels and seen it not as a silly dream, but as a talent. Maria saw me. She saw my potential, and under her tough, demanding mentorship, I started to believe in it myself. The 3rd floor became the most requested floor in the hotel, and I was just getting started. For the next 5 years, I worked for Maria. I climbed the ladder from assistant manager to operations manager. I learned about budgeting, staffing, marketing, and supply chains. I saved every single penny I earned. My life was painfully simple. I drove a 10-year-old car, lived in a tiny apartment, and my only luxury was buying books. My bank account grew steadily. My family never called. I never reached out. The gulf between us felt as wide as the country. I knew I couldn't work for someone else forever. The dream was always to build something of my own. I started looking for an opportunity, a place to start. I found it in a place most people would have driven right past. A rundown, forgotten motel in Newark, New Jersey. It was a sad-looking place. The sign was broken with half the letters missing. The paint was peeling. The parking lot was cracked and full of weeds. And the windows were grimy. It was the kind of place you only stay at if you have no other choice. But I saw something else. It was built with a solid foundation, and it had a prime location near the airport and major highways. It had good bones. I spent months creating a business plan. I drained my entire life savings. Every dollar I had worked so hard for. It was just enough for a down payment. I went to a dozen banks for a loan. They all laughed at me. A young woman with no collateral wanting to buy a derelict motel. It was a joke to them. Finally, a small local credit union took a chance on me. The manager was an older man who said my plan was one of the most detailed and well-researched he had ever seen. He gave me the loan. The interest rate was sky high, but it was my only shot. The day I got the keys, I stood in the empty, dusty lobby and felt a wave of pure terror, followed by a surge of exhilarating freedom. This was all mine. The success or failure rested entirely on my shoulders. I didn't have the money to hire a big construction crew, so I did most of the work myself. I bought a tool belt and learned how to use a power saw. I spent my days in old jeans and a t-shirt covered in dust and paint. I tore out the stained, smelly carpets. I sanded the floors. I patched drywall. I scrubbed every surface until it gleamed. I hired a local plumber and an electrician to do the things I couldn't. But I was there alongside them, learning. My vision wasn't for a luxury hotel. My years in the industry had taught me that what most travelers, especially business travelers and families on a budget, really wanted was not a fancy spa or a gourmet restaurant. They wanted the essentials done perfectly. I called my concept Haven Rest. The idea was simple: to provide a haven for weary travelers. I focused on what mattered. I invested in the best beds I could afford. I installed new plumbing to ensure every shower had great water pressure. I put in a simple but powerful Wi-Fi system and made it free. A novelty at the time. The rooms were minimalist but comfortable. Everything was spotlessly clean. There were no frills, no bellhops, no room service. Just a perfect room for a fair price. And in the small, clean lobby, I installed a high-end coffee machine that brewed excellent coffee available for free 24/7. The day I reopened, I stood behind the front desk myself. I had hired 2 part-time staff, but for the first few weeks, I was the manager, the front desk clerk, and sometimes the housekeeper. I put the new sign up, Haven Rest. I turned the vacancy light on and waited. For hours, nothing happened. Cars just drove by. The terror started to creep back in. What have I done? I've lost everything. Then, late in the afternoon, a big rig pulled into the parking lot. A tired-looking truck driver walked in. He looked around the clean, simple lobby and then at me. "How much for a room?" he asked, his voice gravelly. I told him the price. He nodded. "All right. Just need a clean bed and a hot shower." "That's what we do," I said with a smile. I gave him his key. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the lobby drinking coffee and waiting. The next morning, he came to check out. "Ma'am," he said, handing me the key. "I've been driving a truck for 20 years. That was the most comfortable bed I've ever slept on. And that's the best cup of coffee I've had from a motel lobby. You've got a good thing here." Tears welled in my eyes. I blinked them back. "Thank you," I said. "Please come again." He was the first, but he wasn't the last. Word of mouth began to spread among truck drivers and traveling salespeople. My little motel started filling up every night. I was working 18-hour days, but I had never been happier. Every dollar of profit went right back into the business. Within a year, I had paid off the high-interest loan. Within 2 years, I had saved enough to buy another rundown motel in a different city. I repeated the process. Then, I bought another and another. Haven Rest began to grow. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was a quiet success story. Built one clean room, one comfortable bed, one happy guest at a time. It was an empire built on the simple idea of giving people a place to rest. An empire born from the dreams of a lonely girl in a house where she could never find any rest at all. While I was building my company, my family was busy dismantling theirs. I didn't seek out the information. But in my world, news traveled. I had subscriptions to dozens of financial journals and newspapers. I had to keep up with market trends and investment news. And sometimes in the society pages or the business section of the Portland Tribune, a familiar name would appear. The first crack appeared with my father. For my entire life, Wallace Thatcher had cultivated an image of untouchable success. But his firm was a house of cards. He was involved in high-risk, speculative real estate deals using other people's money. When the market turned, he was exposed. The articles were clinical and brutal. They spoke of fraudulent accounting practices and misleading investors. His name, the name he had guarded so fiercely, was now synonymous with failure and deceit. His company went bankrupt. The lawsuits piled up. Next came the house. The perfect house on the hill. My mother's temple of appearances. Went into foreclosure. I saw a picture of it online in a real estate listing. It was described as a distressed property. The lawn was overgrown and the windows looked dark and empty. I imagined my mother Eleanor having to pack up her pristine life into cardboard boxes, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. I wondered if she was more upset about losing her home or about what the neighbors would think. I felt a strange hollow ache in my chest. It wasn't pity. Not exactly. It was a distant sadness for the life they had chosen to value. A life so fragile it could be swept away by a single market downturn. Owen's fall was less surprising but just as public. His name started appearing in gossip columns. He had always been reckless. But now, without my father's money to cushion his fall, his recklessness had consequences. There were stories of gambling debts owed to dangerous people. There was a messy breakup with a local celebrity. He tried to launch a dozen get-rich-quick schemes, a cryptocurrency, a luxury vitamin water, a talent agency, and each one failed more spectacularly than the last. He was a walking embodiment of entitlement, a boy who had been given everything and had learned the value of nothing. And then there was Chloe. Perfect. Obedient Chloe. She had done exactly what my parents wanted. She had married a man from a family with old money and a powerful name. I had seen their wedding announcement in a magazine years ago. It was a lavish affair, a testament to my parents' social climbing. But the foundation of that marriage was just as weak as my father's business. Her husband was controlling and unfaithful. When his cheating became a public scandal, Chloe filed for divorce. She was left with a small settlement and no skills. No career. No identity of her own. She had been raised to be a beautiful accessory, and now the man she was accessorizing was gone. I watched all of this from my quiet life in Seattle. I kept a digital file, a collection of clippings and links. It felt like watching a slow-motion car crash. Part of me felt a cold, hard satisfaction. They were getting what they deserved. They had built their lives on a foundation of lies and appearances, and now it was all collapsing. But another part of me felt a deep, buried sadness. They were still my family. The ghost of the little girl who just wanted her dad to look at her drawings was still inside me. And she mourned this.